I work EMS. One night I picked up OT on the night shift. We got a call for an unknown condition at an address that gets changed like 5 times before we're flagged down in front of a huge Masonic temple by a frantic woman. She tells us that her boyfriend is the custodian and that he's in charge of locking up every night. He had texted her about an hour ago, saying he had crushing chest pain and shortness of breath, and now he's not answering her texts. The door is locked, but she knows he's inside because his car is there, and there are lights on inside. The huge wooden doors are locked, so we call for firefighters to break them down. They take like 20 minutes smashing a 12-foot tall wooden door off its hinges. Once we make entry, it's pretty spooky. I don't know if y'all have ever been in a Masonic temple before, but they're scary as shit with all the lights off. Marble floors and columns, lots of velvet curtains, and no light switches to be found. Me, my partner, the girlfriend, and 5 firemen start searching the place room by room, floor by floor. We are totally expecting to find a corpse, and possibly a ghost or two. We clear the first floor and start up the stairs. An interesting thing about Masonic temples is that they tend to get stranger the higher you go in them. By the 3rd floor, all of us are freaking the fuck out and jumping at shadows. But somehow, we push onwards to the 5th and final floor. At this point, there are huge spooky chandeliers, weird symbols painted everywhere, and even the fire lieutenant is getting freaked out. The top floor consists of a big room with a long hallway leading off it. All the way down the pitch black hallway, we can see a door that has the lights on behind it. We slowly creep towards it, none of us wanting to be first in line. Eventually, we reach the doorway, and after a solid minute of silently miming who should open the door, my partner and I agree that we'll do it together. We take a couple of deep breaths, silently count to 3, and throw the door open. As our eyes adjust to the light, we see a middle-aged man jump up from a desk, rip off his headphones, and frantically try to turn off the super hardcore porn he's been watching. He apparently had texted his girlfriend saying he had a burrito for dinner that didn't quite agree with him, and she had wildly misunderstood his text. As we all fled the building, we could still hear the couple arguing as he began to wonder how we had gotten into the building and who would compensate them for their door. I was working as a security guard one night at the local high school pool. A friend drove by to bring me some lunch sometime around 2 a.m. He stayed for a bit, and we were just shooting the shit in the parking lot while I ate my food. Then, all of a sudden, in the dead silence of the night, there was a big splash from the pool behind us, like a large person doing a cannonball off the high dive. We both looked at each other, surprised. I immediately took off running towards the pool, through the parking lot, and around a small structure that served as an administrative building. I was ready to catch my first perpetrator ever, figuring it was just some troublemaking kids. I rounded the corner, and I couldn't believe what I saw. Nothing. There was no sign it had ever happened. The water was completely still. The concrete around it was dry, and there wasn't a single person in sight. Plus, the pool was surrounded by an 8-foot iron fence, so no way for a quick getaway. It couldn't have taken more than 15 seconds to reach the pool from where we were standing. I've never believed in ghosts, but that was definitely the creepiest thing I've ever seen or heard. I used to work at service stations, as we call them in Australia. Here are a few of my stories. Number 1. A guy came in one night around 1 a.m. looking out of it. He asked to use the toilet, so I let him in. He comes out 15 minutes later, literally covered in fucking blood and screaming. I call the cops and an ambulance. The cops arrive first. They have to wrestle him to the ground. I check the toilet and the bowl itself is almost overflowing with shit and blood, and there's blood smeared absolutely everywhere. My manager refuses to come in, as they are required to do with all incidents, because it's his turn to take the kids to school in the morning, and I'm left cleaning the toilet and making a police report. Australia Day night, about 3 a.m. It's a massively busy night, and it's just winding down. This limo pulls into the forecourt, and about 5 girls in G-strings get out and come inside. Just G-strings. I stare because, frankly, they're all gorgeous. They ask for about 15 boxes of 2-liter drinks as mixers for their party. They also buy about 6 cartons of cigarettes and mountains of chips and dip and other fun stuff. I was expecting a credit card, but the one doing all the talking whips out this absolutely fucking massive bundle of cash and pays in brand new $50 notes. They load it all into the limo and leave. My manager refused to give me a copy of the footage. Number 3. Attempted murder on the forecourt one night. An old Mercedes came in off the road and slammed into a guy walking across the forecourt, literally catapulting him into the air and knocking him about 5 meters. He jumped up and ran off. I got the Mercedes number plate and called the cops. Went to court as a witness for that one. Number 4. I was held up 3 times in my time working at the service stations. One with a knife, once with a crowbar, and once with a gun. The crowbar was the scariest because he caught me out from behind the counter and we had a fight. I lost. Number 5. I had a group of kids between the ages of 13 and 15 go crazy in the store one night because I refused to sell them cigarettes. They were opening the bottles of kerosene we sell and pouring it on the floor, trying to light it on fire. They smashed one of the front windows, which is pretty damn impressive, and threw tin food at me. The cops arrived as I was chasing one of them with a baseball bat because he threw baked beans at my car. Number 6. I had girls pee themselves because there was a queue for the toilet. Friday nights. Number 7. I walked into work one night just in time to see this guy who had been reading a magazine put it down and walk up behind this girl who was standing in line to pay for her fuel and smash her in the side of the head. He then took off. I chased him for a bit, but he got clean away. Came back to the store and the girl was still lying there. I called an ambulance and the police. Turned out it was just some random attack. We caught the guy because of our video footage. Number 8. I worked opening night at a refurbished store just across the road from university on campus housing. I had a queue of customers out the door. It was the middle of January and it was 30 degrees at nighttime and our air conditioner failed. Most people were okay, but one girl and guy decided we were taking too long and climbed on the barbecue gas canister cage and started to strip tease to entertain everyone. Show was worth it. The cops even waited for them to finish. I worked in a home-like facility for the elderly. I had a woman who liked to wander a lot in the nights, and I had to keep her out of other residents' rooms. One overnight shift, I was sitting on a couch at the front of the facility. I had a clear, straight view down the hallway. I saw what I thought was the wandering woman go into a room that wasn't hers. I quickly got up from the couch, walked straight down the dark hallway and peeked into the room that I saw her walk into. The only resident in the room was the one that belonged there, sleeping on the bed. I went to the wandering resident's room and found her still asleep in her own bed as well. I immediately knew I had seen a ghost or spirit. Although I acknowledged it, I was still shaken. I sat back down on the couch and stared down the hallway for most of the night, not really wanting to move. My shift ended and I went home to sleep for the day. Upon returning for my shift the next evening, I was informed that the resident in which I thought I saw someone going into the room of had died very suddenly during mid-morning. It was a little unsettling, but I had to recognize that Maybe one of her loved ones on the other side was there to get her ready. Working with death often, you are privy to these types of things sometimes. Some of them are more nerve-wracking than others. One more tidbit from a night shift. While working around 2 or 3 in the morning, I was standing in the middle of a living room that is lined with bookshelves on one side of the room. I was thinking about a particular resident that actually did not take a liking to me. The resident had passed away about 6 months previous. At the moment I was thinking about this patient, a book falls off the bookshelf. The book literally came off the shelf and landed on the floor about 6 feet away. I would say it flew off the shelf, but I doubt anybody would believe me. I worked at Tim Hortons 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift. From 11 to 5:30, there were only 2 of us, and we were right next to the hospital, and we had a forest behind us. I've got 3 stories, so I'll just list them. Number 1. Came into my shift at 10:50-ish to get ready, and there was a really sketchy guy in the lobby drinking from what looked like a chemical bottle. When I got to the back, the manager that was about to leave informed me that the guy was drinking rubbing alcohol and that I shouldn't approach him for safety reasons. I clock in and start doing my job, and I look up and he's gone 1 hour later. I slowly walk to the table and he's under it, passed out. Now keep in mind, I'm a 17-year-old who's scared shitless of drunks, so I don't want to wake him up for fear of being attacked, and I also want to follow my manager's orders, and I just waited out. So I walked to the other coworker and played rock, paper, scissors with her to determine who should call the police, or if I should call the police. I won, so I phoned the police, and about 11 paramedics pulled up, since we were next to the hospital, and started asking a ton of questions, and they wheeled him out of there in a stretcher. Turns out, if I had called an hour later, he would have died. So, basically rock, paper, scissors saved his life. Number 2. We had some hookers hanging out in the front of the Timmy's with one really jacked white guy in a big fur coat. Literally, the coat you think of when you think of a pimp. After about 30 to 45 minutes of their arrival, 2 cop cars pull up and arrest all the hookers. However, they couldn't arrest the pimp because he wasn't officially doing anything wrong, as all the girls told the cops that they weren't related to him at all. Number 3. Last one, which is probably the sketchiest and scariest day. We had a guy who was walking around out front of the store staring into it while holding a hatchet and wearing a smiling clown mask. Right when I noticed him, I locked the doors. No managers from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m., so we have to use our own judgment. And then I called the police instantly. When the cop car was pulling up, the guy booked it into the forest with his hatchet, and the cops never caught him. Bear in mind, the cops took a good 15 minutes to get there, so he stood completely still, like a scarecrow, staring in at me the entire time. I work night shift in an emergency department. Creepy doesn't even begin to suffice to describe the shit I see. Nighttime brings out the underworld. Drugs, alcohol, sex, you name it. People seek it under the cover of night. I've taken care of rape victims, people high on PCP, prostitutes whose John got a little too rough, even the random white-collar Fortune 500 dude with a 16-inch dildo stuck in an orifice where it shouldn't have been. And that's just another night in the department. I wouldn't say this incident is so much creepy, but it just goes to show how difficult this job can be. I once took care of 2 people involved in a robbery. One was the victim, one was the robber. Simple, right? Well, the victim was beaten with a pipe so badly the bones in his face were basically mush. He needed major surgery, and I believe he had bleeding in his brain. I primarily took care of the thug who robbed him. While he was sitting there with the cops, he described in detail to me how much he loved seeing that man's face cave in, how much he loved killing him. I never have experienced someone so sober, so cold, describe in explicit detail how much he enjoyed attempting to murder someone. To give you an idea of what I was looking at, the blood that was all over this man was not his, as he did not have a single injury that we could find. The man was only brought to the ER to be cleared for jail. About 7-ish years ago, I was working on a piece of software at my company, which had camera recording functionality. But because of the platform and length of recording, it was actually taking stills every dozen or so seconds for a stop-motion film sort of thing. Anyway, one night I leave it going to ensure that it can 1. Record its maximum length, and 2. Remain stable over long periods of time. So in the morning, I get in and sit down and review last night's footage for quality and stability's sake. Quiet and still office with lights on and a couple of people. People leave, lights turn off, darkness, darkness, darkness. But there in the faint light from the outside coming in through the window, I see something in the office move. I start to go back and forth between frames when the lights went off and when they came back on. And it seems a chair had turned, all before anyone came in. I sat there and reviewed the footage for a bit before talking with my supervisor, who informed me that the last shift last night ended around 9 p.m. and that no one had entered the office between 9 p.m. and 6 a.m. I shrugged it off and continued my daily work, but before I left for the night, I left the camera recording again. Coming in the next day, I reviewed the footage, and again, a chair or two had been turned. I told my supervisor again, who again assured me that no one was in last night, but now he too was curious and asked around and was told absolutely no one was in the office at night. So now my supervisor asked me to leave the camera recording each night, and every morning when we came in, we reviewed the footage. And every morning the footage showed chairs moved and turned. Some chairs had moved a few feet even. So on one of the last nights of us using this software, we pointed the camera directly at the row where chairs kept moving. Then, with there no night shift that night, we pulled all the chairs to the front of the row to see where they would be the next day. When we came in the next morning, it was evident they had been moved, as some had been turned and one had been rolled back against the wall roughly 20 feet from where we left it. Reviewing the camera footage showed nothing moved smoothly, as it was 12-second frames, only a set of chairs in a cluster, then a set of turned and slightly moved chair, and one single chair 20 feet away from the others. We never got a good explanation. We checked with all the departments and the cleaning crew, and no one had a reply that backed up why the chairs would move overnight.